On October 20, 1944, General Douglas MacArthur made his legendary wade across the shallow waters of Leyte Beach in the Philippines, a moment that would be immortalized in photographs and history books alike. Cameras flashed as journalists captured every careful step he took, ensuring that the world would see the return he had promised nearly 2 years earlier. MacArthur's vow, "I shall return," had become a rallying cry for the American public after his evacuation in 1942. But the reality of the beach was far from the heroic image. Japanese snipers remained active in the tree line, and American soldiers had to hold protective positions while improvising security to allow MacArthur's theatrical entrance. This was no ordinary military operation. It was a carefully staged spectacle designed to dominate the headlines and solidify MacArthur's public image. For him, the visual drama mattered more than operational safety. Hours were spent waiting at the shore until lighting, camera positions, and timing aligned perfectly for maximum impact. Soldiers risked their lives to protect a general whose priority was optics rather than battlefield prudence. Every move, every gesture was calculated to create a narrative of triumph, courage, and promise-keeping, while the underlying strategic risks went largely unnoticed by the public. MacArthur's wade into Leyte would become one of the most iconic images of World War II, symbolizing not only American resolve, but also the meticulous orchestration behind the man who understood that perception could be as powerful as artillery. Behind the heroic photographs lay a web of improvisation, risk, and command decisions that exposed the tension between theatrical heroism and the brutal realities of war, setting the stage for a campaign where public image and strategy were inseparably intertwined. In Washington, President Franklin D. Roosevelt followed every report of MacArthur's Leyte landing with a mixture of frustration and reluctant acceptance. The general had long demonstrated a pattern of staging dramatic acts in active combat zones, disregarding the formal chain of command and risking both lives and resources for public effect. Roosevelt,
however, understood the political stakes. MacArthur was immensely popular, and to publicly discipline him would provoke outrage and weaken national morale at a critical point in the war. Beyond the theatrics, military planners recognized the real consequences. Troops had to stretch defensive positions to safeguard the general, while air and naval resources were shifted to accommodate his public display rather than operational necessity. Yet Roosevelt made a calculated decision to tolerate MacArthur's antics. His popularity rendered direct intervention politically dangerous. Advisors like Admiral William Leahy and General George Marshall observed MacArthur's maneuverings closely, knowing the general's capacity to manipulate both the press and political opinion. Roosevelt's approach balanced discipline with pragmatism. Letting MacArthur perform his heroic gestures preserved public morale and reinforced national pride, even if it complicated operational efficiency. Behind the headlines, troops endured the realities of combat, improvising to protect a figure whose image would dominate newspapers and newsreels worldwide. MacArthur's carefully staged entrance to Leyte exemplified the tension between media-driven heroism and battlefield reality, highlighting how public perception could shape strategic decisions and political calculations, even as the risks to soldiers remained ever present. The photograph of MacArthur emerging from the water symbolized more than a general returning. It embodied the fusion of personal ambition, media mastery, and political leverage that defined his approach to war. Douglas MacArthur had been testing Roosevelt's tolerance since 1942, when he was forced to evacuate the Philippines under Japanese pressure. From the moment he reached Australia, he crafted a narrative of heroism, issuing the iconic pledge, "I shall return." This statement, brief and dramatic, captivated the American public and established MacArthur as the face of the Pacific War. The press eagerly amplified this image, portraying him as a fearless leader who would personally lead the fight against Japan. Yet soldiers on the front lines experienced a different reality.
They called him Dugout Doug, noting the contrast between his safe, orchestrated appearances and the harsh conditions they endured in jungles, mountains, and islands. While the public celebrated his bravery, soldiers witnessed the detachment of a general who prioritized image over immediate operational engagement. This duality created tension and resentment, especially among troops forced to adjust their movements, protect him during orchestrated spectacles, and endure unnecessary risk so the nation could admire a hero in photographs. MacArthur's public persona, carefully curated through interviews, photographs, and controlled media appearances, influenced operational decisions far beyond the battlefield. By manipulating perception, he ensured that political and public pressures would bend military strategy towards his preferred courses of action. This contrast between myth and reality exemplified the power of charisma in war. A single figure could command both public devotion and military attention, reshaping strategy while masking the sacrifices demanded of ordinary soldiers. MacArthur's mastery of narrative and timing highlighted the complex intersection of ego, ambition, and leadership in a global conflict. The political stakes surrounding MacArthur were immense. Roosevelt and his advisors recognized that the general's immense popularity made any attempt at public discipline politically perilous. Republicans and conservative media figures already considered him a potential presidential contender, amplifying the sensitivity of any intervention. MacArthur's return to the Philippines was not merely a military operation, it was a calculated political maneuver. By controlling the narrative, he framed the liberation of the islands as a moral imperative, making it politically impossible for Roosevelt to countermand his plans without public backlash. Journalists, unknowingly instrumental in his strategy, amplified MacArthur's preferred version of events, portraying him as a hero who kept promises and inspired national pride. Meanwhile, the underlying operational challenges were obscured. Soldiers risked lives, defensive lines were stretched, and resources were diverted.
A careful orchestration of public perception allowed MacArthur to secure strategic decisions through influence rather than formal military channels. Roosevelt's tolerance reflected a complex balance of political calculation and military necessity. By letting MacArthur perform these acts, the president preserved public morale, avoided internal political friction, and maintained the credibility of American leadership in the Pacific. MacArthur's ability to intertwine politics, media, and military strategy demonstrated how personal ambition could reshape operational priorities, creating a scenario where perception often outweighed practicality on the battlefield. The strategy of the Pacific Campaign itself became a battleground of egos and political calculation. Military planners favored a central route led by Admiral Chester Nimitz through the Marshall and Mariana Islands, eventually reaching the Philippines and Formosa. This path promised quicker, more efficient victories with fewer casualties. In contrast, MacArthur advocated the northern route, moving through New Guinea and up to the Philippines, a path longer, more dangerous, and costlier in lives. Military leaders, including General George Marshall and Admiral Ernest King, recognized that MacArthur's plan was driven as much by personal ambition and media spectacle as by military logic. King, a strict advocate of efficiency, openly despised MacArthur's ego, viewing him as a self-serving obstacle to the war effort. Yet Roosevelt's calculations rendered opposition largely symbolic. MacArthur's immense popularity and public image made outright intervention politically untenable. The interplay of politics and strategy created an unusual scenario, one where operational inefficiency was tolerated to preserve the charisma and influence of a single general. MacArthur skillfully exploited the press and political channels to frame the Philippines as both a moral imperative and a matter of national honor, forcing Roosevelt to navigate between practical military strategy and the necessity of public support. Through this, MacArthur transformed battlefield decisions into a theater of public influence, blending diplomacy,
Media manipulation, and strategic ambition into a unique formula that few leaders could contest. Every tactical choice was colored by his understanding of perception, making the war not just a contest of armies, but of image, persuasion, and political leverage. MacArthur's manipulation extended beyond media to direct interactions with lawmakers and political influencers. By cultivating relationships with sympathetic Republican congressmen and conservative journalists, he amplified pressure on Roosevelt to approve his preferred strategy. Information flowed selectively, often classified details presented in ways that reinforced his narrative of urgency and necessity. Journalists, believing they reported objective military analysis, unknowingly became instruments in MacArthur's strategic persuasion. The general's skill lay in making public sentiment a tool of command. By controlling how events were perceived, he constrained Roosevelt's and Allied commanders' options without issuing a single formal order. Every carefully staged interview, every dramatic photograph furthered his strategic goals.
This approach, while effective, introduced tensions with fellow commanders and exposed the gap between public perception and operational reality. Soldiers on the ground endured dangerous conditions, improvising to protect MacArthur and facilitate his staged moments, while the general remained highly visible, shaping the narrative from relatively safe positions. The duality of his persona, a fearless public hero and a carefully orchestrating operator behind the scenes, created both inspiration and resentment. MacArthur's mastery of image, combined with political acumen, ensured that operational plans could be reshaped in his favor, demonstrating the profound influence of perception in war.
By 1944, the Leyte invasion highlighted the consequences of MacArthur's strategic and theatrical decisions. The landing was planned meticulously for photographic effect, with troops and naval assets adjusted to protect the general's performance rather than serve purely tactical objectives. Hours before he stepped onto the beach, soldiers positioned themselves under hazardous conditions, covering areas that were technically unsecured. Japanese forces remained active, and snipers threatened anyone exposed. The result was a carefully choreographed spectacle of heroism that minimized immediate risk to MacArthur while maximizing visual impact. Photographs captured him wading ashore, helmet glinting, with a determined expression that conveyed bravery and commitment. Headlines across the United States hailed the return of the general, cementing his status as a national hero. Yet behind the lens, the operational reality was far more precarious. The troops who facilitated the spectacle risked life and limb, adjusting formations, securing lines, and improvising under threat. The staged landing became a symbol not only of American resolve, but also of the tension between media, politics, and warfare. MacArthur's ability to leverage public perception reshaped the strategic decision-making process, forcing Allied leadership to prioritize image alongside military efficiency. The political ramifications of MacArthur's actions were immense. Roosevelt, acutely aware of the general's popularity and the potential backlash from public opinion, chose tolerance over discipline. Any attempt to curb MacArthur's autonomy risked political fallout, as he had become a household name and symbol of hope for an anxious nation. The general's audacious use of media and political influence ensured that operational strategies aligned with his personal and public ambitions. This manipulation created friction with fellow commanders, such as Admiral King, who prioritized efficiency and minimized risk, and General Marshall, who navigated a careful balance between operational necessity and political reality. MacArthur's interventions turned strategic debates into public spectacles, forcing leaders to
weigh public perception against purely military judgment. The liberation of the Philippines was not just a campaign, it was a theater in which MacArthur wielded public opinion as a strategic weapon, compelling both allies and the president to acquiesce to his vision. The public, captivated by his heroics, remained largely unaware of the operational compromises and risks undertaken to stage his dramatic return. As the Philippines campaign progressed, the disparity between MacArthur's public image and operational realities became even more pronounced. Soldiers endured harsh tropical conditions, disease, and constant enemy engagement, while MacArthur remained highly visible, orchestrating the media narrative from relatively safe positions. Troops witnessed firsthand the contrast between the man hailed as a fearless leader and the manipulations required to stage these heroic moments. Yet his influence extended far beyond photographs and headlines. By maintaining control of the narrative, MacArthur effectively shaped the strategic options available to Roosevelt and his commanders. Political pressure, amplified by newspapers and radio broadcasts, constrained Allied leadership, compelling them to accommodate MacArthur's ambitions. Roosevelt, mindful of both the war effort and public perception, allowed the general unprecedented leeway. This tolerance, however, came at a cost. Operational efficiency was often secondary to theatrical presentation, and resources were diverted to create dramatic moments rather than to optimize military success. Nevertheless, the strategy succeeded in mobilizing American morale and sustaining domestic support for the war. MacArthur's blend of political acumen, media manipulation, and strategic foresight demonstrated a unique form of leadership, one where perception could influence policy and a general's public persona could alter the course of a major campaign. In effect, he transformed the battlefield into a stage and the media into a strategic weapon, making public opinion as decisive as troop movements or logistical planning. By the end of 1944, MacArthur's return to the Philippines had achieved its dual purpose: dramatic public triumph,
military foothold in the Pacific. Yet behind the iconic images lay a complex reality. Commanders and soldiers had navigated risks, adapted plans, and absorbed casualties to enable his theatrical moments. Roosevelt's political calculus, balancing military necessity against the consequences of undermining a national hero, had allowed MacArthur to manipulate strategy without consequence. The general's use of media, public sentiment, and political influence had rewritten the rules of military command, showing that leadership extended beyond tactical decisions into shaping perception and policy. The Leyte landing, immortalized in photographs, became a symbol of American resolve, illustrating how a single leader could dominate both the battlefield and the national imagination. MacArthur's campaign highlighted the intricate interplay between strategy, politics, and media, demonstrating that victory in war is as much about controlling the narrative as it is about defeating the enemy. Soldiers, journalists, politicians, and the public all became actors in a drama orchestrated by one man's vision, ambition, and understanding of human perception. Ultimately, the campaign's success rested not solely on military execution, but on the mastery of image, communication, and political leverage, a testament to MacArthur's unparalleled ability to navigate war as both a commander and a public figure. Wow, what a story! Douglas MacArthur's return to the Philippines wasn't just a military operation. It was a masterclass in strategy, politics, and media manipulation. It really makes you think about how leadership isn't just about orders on a battlefield, but also about shaping perception and influencing decisions on a national and international stage. If you found this deep dive into history fascinating, don't forget to hit that like button. Your support really helps me bring more stories like this to life. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode of incredible history and behind-the-scenes insights from World War II. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about MacArthur's approach? Was it brilliance or ego?
Expense of his soldiers? Drop your comments below. I read every single one, and I'm curious to know what you think. History is full of these dramatic moments that shaped the world, and together we can uncover them all. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.